Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Out on a Limb podcast. If you see that we're laughing, it's because we've been laughing.
We have.
And we finally just had to start recording.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, you're going to have probably a good reel of outtakes eventually, one of these days, of all of our shenanigans behind the scenes.
Right. We're willing to share the authenticity of the moment.
That's right. Our pre podcast moments.
But don't hold that against us, right?
That's
We're real.
Up and going.
Exactly.
But today we're going to talk about contracts versus free will. And the reason this came up,
Deep
and
subject.
this is news to him.
is that funny on the surface? Or, no, okay.
Some of it's in.
It's really interesting. But we had a client who asked some really deep, good questions. For example, one of her concerns was, I guess she's having a lot of bad luck or things happening that she wouldn't have written into her contract, she thinks, right?
Yeah.
Why would I write all this crap into my contract? And she's like, and what's the point? Where's the free will if all of these things I have to experience because I wrote it in my contract, right? And I'm sure many of us have thought that.
Why the hell would I do this?
Right.
And not only why, but what can I do about it? You're helpless. You feel helpless because you're like, what do you mean free will? There's no free will. I am a victim of my circumstances because I wrote it in my contract, right? So those are the kind of things we're going to dive into today.
Well, there's good contemplation involved with that, because if you say you have free will, but yet there are certain circumstances that really don't fall under free will, then how do you govern
And that's what we're going to talk about.
Mhm.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's no victims in our world, so we're gonna
Right.
victimize you.
Exactly.
But to say that you wrote this into your contract, that's the first and most important
Mhm.
point, Sam, is
Yeah.
to say that you wrote it in your contract is not to say that you're a victim and you're to blame, that we're blaming the victim, because that is absolutely not the case if you understand things from the higher perspective. And hopefully at the end of this episode, you will understand things a little bit better or have a little bit deeper understanding, right?
Mhm.
So it wasn't her higher self. Actually, she wanted to do she did a galactic channeling. And so her primary galactic alignment is the Leadins. And so we called in on the Leadins, and that's who we were asking these questions of. And they gave a long, beautiful answer. But one of the things that they said was that our contracts are not to be looked at as like a movie script where you write out this script and you sign it and that's what happens. Like
That's what plays out.
you
verbatim.
at this point in time say this and the other person reacts by this and that. It's not like that.
Yeah.
So what you were mentioning before the show is that it's more of a roadmap. It's more like a life plan.
Mhm.
So we have kind of wide rails and we can navigate within these wide rails.
Mhm.
And for example, let me give you just an example.
Okay.
So when you come into this life, what you write into your contract actually is, okay, I want to learn about self-worth.
Mhm.
And you make agreements with other souls to come in that will help to teach you give you these experiences, to teach you this concept, right?
Sure.
So for example, as a female, I might come in and say, okay, I'm going to write a contract with this soul who will be my boyfriend and or my spouse, and they're going to teach me about self-worth. They don't say, you don't write in your contract, how am I going to learn about self-worth? Or my husband's going to be abusive to me, or and God forbid these experiences where, domestic violence and somebody's murdered or whatever. You don't come in with the intention of murdering someone. You come in an agreement with that soul to work through a concept that you want to experience. So if it's self-worth, for example, you might start dating this soul and he gaslights you, or he stands you up, or he puts you down, or whatever it is. And there's all these red flags and you don't get it yet because you had the opportunity. Oh, I need to develop self-worth. I'm worth more than this. This is not the right person for me. And you leave. So some people take the easy way and they learn early, right? Some people, maybe they don't. And so they marry the person and it becomes a little bit more aggressive or what have you until you learn, or even just as simple as having friends who come in, teach you this lesson, and you have maybe a breakup, explosive situation with your friend, and then you have you encounter another person who's teaching you the same thing. So if you're not getting it the first time, the lessons can come in a little bit stronger as you go, and they'll keep coming in until you learn
Until the
that
concept
is absorbed.
yeah.
I have an example of that because that has happened in my life, and it's just so fascinating because I can see it real clearly.
After the fact, probably, right?
In the
Oh, in
towards
the moment?
end,
Okay.
towards the end of it, I was finally cluing in. So I had a father who was very narcissistic, and but it's your father, so you just kind of go along with things. But as I was getting older, that's where the rub started to happen. But that I just look at that as my overarching relationship, and this is having to do with self-worth and recognizing people's motives and things like that. So then after and part of the influence, when you're familiar with that, it becomes that draw, like you get used to it. So then I pull into my life. I end up marrying someone, my first marriage, who was such a narcissist. And like, it was just, he had me under his thumb. I was just so small, so tiny. Everything that he said, I would jump, do it, whatever it was. And that was, it took me a good year of counseling while in the marriage to finally have the courage to leave that. So you would think I would have learned, but no. Then I end up, and my father, I'm having these interactions with my father, and I'm starting to see I saw the definite similarities between the two. Then I get a business partner, and the business partner, I think, this is great. This is going to be wonderful. And we're going into this computer business. And it's like, all of a sudden he's taking what was simple and he keeps expanding upon it and going, now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. And like, he would do it overnight, and I had no control. And then I felt like, well, he seems to know more than me. And I started giving away my power and all this stuff, but it was all about what he wanted to do and how he saw the business and how he, and I managed to be able to pull out of that. It took a bit, but I managed to be able to pull out of that and recognize, well, that was similar. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm still having the encounters with my father, which is kind of the thing that I kept bouncing these experiences off of, going, oh, that's like this. Oh, that's like this. Then I had I had another business partner, this time female, and she had just decided, well, the money that we had in the bank, there was something she wanted to go do. And she just pulled all the money out of the bank. And when I went to go pay one of our business bills, the money was gone. Several, like $6,000, $7,000 for her to go experience something she wanted to experience. And I was kind of going, okay, why am I not this way? What is going on here? What is, and why am I not recognizing these people who are all in it for themselves? And like, they see the energy of my excitement, and they want that excitement, but then they take whatever I have to offer, and they're just taking. Right. And so I'm kind of going, okay, how does this compare with my father? And so I'm really starting to bounce it. And then I was going to go into business with this couple who did marketing, and my husband was going to be a part of it. And it was really fun talking to them about things, but by then, this is like my 5th or 6th round with narcissism, it just took a couple of meetings, and my husband and I going, what is going on here? Yeah. And so I had him to bounce it, off of, and we were like, nope, tapping out. And I could really see it. Now I did have one more bout with someone who is narcissistic,
almost recently. Like a test, maybe. Yeah.
And I recognized, nope, I can't be associated with it. I've got to move out of that space. Yeah. And it's just amazing. That's been the overarching, and with my father, it was learning how to find value within myself. And regardless of what he said, so he served as kind of this mirror of all these other relationships. But in the overarching thing, it was also for me to learn to find that self-worth, regardless of what he thought or said or whatever. Right. And we ended up healing our relationship towards the end of his life.
Oh, good.
So, that was like a huge experience to have. And, I started off in victim mode. Sure. And then I moved into awareness mode. And then I moved into, oh, hell no mode.
Yeah. Recovery mode. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's degrees of it, but it'll cycle back around to, did you really learn? Because you come to learn that lesson. Yeah. And you don't necessarily get it. Like learning the first time is you just kind of going, oh, I didn't like that. I'm going this way. But you kind of got to get tested on it to go, now we're going to make this be your child, or now we're going to make this be, your boss, or like they got to put it in different
context.
Right. Yeah. So that you really become aware and learn and
Yes.
even have friends who are experiencing it themselves so that you can then go, oh, I can see that in that
Mhm.
person, you know.
I think that's another part of that process is you become an observer. At some point you become an observer and you get to see all the other quote unquote relationships, whether that's a
Mhm.
business relationship or an actual physical relationship. You can look in and kind of peer behind the curtain and say, oh yeah, I recognize all the signs. I recognize all
Mhm.
that. Oh, wait a minute. That's how that could, okay. Yep. And now you get to see the bigger picture for yourself. And then you go into the recovery mode.
And then you
Yeah.
apply it
And
the
then
next
right,
time.
yeah.
And just as a note, that doesn't mean that it's your job then to help them become aware.
No.
You can point it out and say, wow, this is very similar to.
No, right.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it is for them, that's their experience to have. And it was just for you to be able to, like we were having this conversation last night,
Mm.
how reading some books where there's these kinds of scenarios or watching a movie that had certain kinds of scenarios that sometimes we need to see it outside of ourselves.
Right.
To go, how would I deal with this? How would I relate to this? But it doesn't, you don't have to go through it all. I mean, you can just observe around you
Right. Right.
instead of having to dive into it.
Yeah. And I think there's two sides to that coin of, is it some of our nature to help others and be witness to them from our experiences? Yes. But we also have to have the awareness enough to understand that if you do approach and you do say, okay, this is what I see, if you're good, close friends, they should be open to listening,
Mhm.
but they may not be ready to hear. Right.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
take it. So that's the point at which you just, you give the information and then you back off because you can't do
Right.
anything. It's their path because, it's your path. People probably on your path were telling you the same thing. You just,
Well, you can't hear it. You literally
Right.
can't hear it till you're ready to hear it.
Well,
Yeah.
and because you need to, it's like things, you have to resonate with the energy of.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's not time for you to become aware because you need
Right.
to be in
That's
that
right.
experience and have that your own personal awakening. So, in one sense, people are, there's the big awakening,
Yeah.
but there's all kinds of other
Many
awakenings.
many
that are
awakenings
happening
all along the way.
where you learn to trust in yourself.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like
That's a good point.
being in a for me, I would equate it to like being in a college level math class where I'm not very good at math, but
Mhm.
you don't see the equations starting to formulate on the board until it happens over and
Till you're
over and
ready.
over and over again. All of a sudden there's that moment where it just clicks.
Yep.
And now you see the equations appearing on the board by what's up there and you're like, oh, it all makes sense.
Right.
It's like that for our lives. I mean, we have to do, many of us have to do it over and over. And that is where the frustration comes in. It's like, why do I keep writing this crap into my contract? Why do I have to keep experiencing this over and over and over and over?
And then people feel regret
Yeah.
and all those
When am I
other
gonna
kinds of
learn this?
things. You
Right.
got to learn to
Right. And
When
it's
am I
not
gonna learn that
about,
lesson?
not about beating yourself up about
No.
that at all, because you're awakening to that when you're ready.
That's right. That's right.
So, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because that was the perfect example of sometimes it takes multiple instances or whatever
Mhm.
until you're ready to get it. And it's
Yeah.
about pattern recognition,
Yeah.
Oh,
right? Like we have a
yes.
friend who constantly marries the bad boy.
Yeah.
So at some point she had to stop and ask herself, why do I keep marrying what's missing that I need to keep filling it with this bad boy
Persona.
kind of persona? Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to going back to the contract thing, our contracts that we write, so what you're saying and what I took out of that was, our contracts are not granular by any means.
Correct.
They're not granular
Right.
down to, on Tuesday at 9:35, I'm going to do this to say to this person that. No, it's more of the 30,000 foot view of little, breadcrumbs along your path of when something may or may not take place, because we're in a fluid environment of existence.
Right. And with that, because your path is so wide and you have all of this leeway in free will,
Mhm.
they said sometimes you can take some pretty drastic detours. If you do
Mhm.
something that is completely outside of what you had kind of contracted, you're off on a detour.
Yeah.
Your guides and your higher self will eventually, nudge you till you get back into the path, so that you are,
Mhm.
because when you get to the other side after you transition,
Yeah.
you do a life review,
Yeah.
and you are looking at those things and where you maybe fell short or what you really did spectacularly. And you don't beat yourself up about it. It's
Yep.
just, you're seeing it from God's eyes. You're seeing it from the bigger picture. And so you can see those detours so you would regret if you stayed on a detour and the guides didn't help you kind of get back into that lane. You would regret, because that's what you wanted to incarnate for, was to have that experience to add to your kind of your toolbox of your oversoul.
Yeah. I like the memes about, your spirit guides watching and their head slapping themselves like,
I want to be a spirit guide next time.
I know, right?
So long time ago during my journey, and it was in the 80s, I went to listen to Sylvia Brown. And I loved her description of it, because she was super irreverent. And she was just like, you got to wonder, like, we're on the other side. We're going, I think I'm going to have another lifetime. And she's like, we must be like so high, like, so drunk and like have done a few Quaaludes, whatever. And we sit there and go, I want to have a car accident, remove a leg. And then I'm going to find this guy that I love, and we're going to get together, and then we're going to lose babies. And like, and she just, she says all this and she's, and with her, just rah, 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 kind of way of saying it. But in a sense, that's
a lot of truth in that.
In the way. So I have a different way of describing it with my clients instead of that rah, and I like mine because it paints a prettier picture. But the way that my understanding thus far of it is that that we choose, okay, it's time for us. I want to go back in the game, So you decide this is what you want to learn. And as you're making those decisions, I mean, think how intricate this is. There's someone else going, well, I would like to learn what it's like to be this. And another person going, well, I would like to, have this experience. And so it all starts to align with each other. And, so we start coming together going, okay, well, I will be this person and I'll be this person. And, it becomes more of the way I describe it is it becomes, we're weaving this tapestry, a very intricate tapestry of this life experience.
Yeah.
And so it's not to say that, there are some people I think that you're intending to come across on your path that are going to help create something for you. It could be random, but I think there's definitely some points, and it's kind of like in between those points of meeting or having certain events, I call them milestones, happen. There's all this free will. You can go right to it. You can take the long way around it, or you can just sit there and be stubborn and not move forward at all. And then the thing is, you get to your life review and you go,
right.
I wasted that opportunity.
I probably should have done a little more. Yeah.
Which is why your guides want to kind of help you out a little bit.
And when you realize that, you're here to have those experiences, if you can move into that space, then you meet them head on. You go, bring it on. What's next? Because I planned this. I want to learn from this. Yeah. And some people say, oh, it's because of karma, a karmic debt. And I don't, to me, it's never been that. I've had too many sessions with people who have crossed over, like they're talking to someone who's crossed over and they're just like, I wish that I had gone for it. I understand why I didn't, but the goal is to go through those experiences and to heal, remove any regrets, heal from it, have that understanding before you cross over. And that's the prize. Yeah. That's really like, that's the golden thing we all want to go for. Yeah. It's not going to always happen. Right. But that's the ultimate.
And just as an aside to that, but we are not only healing things in our own life, but what I'm finding now is that we're healing the whole ancestral line back. Like if you come in with some serious abuse or things going on in your ancestral line, now's the time because of where we're evolving.
So it's more of a recent, that's a recent
development in the contract.
Yeah. Of clearing that and basically dusting off the cobwebs of that ancestral line and healing it. So that way your future path doesn't hold that. And you could call it karma, you could say that it's karma, but you're not perpetuating that ancestral, would damage be the right word to say, but that ancestral turmoil,
the energy of
it that would carry on into the future. Many of the clients that we've seen over the last several years, many of them, they take on a specific role in this life to end any ancestral turmoil, garbage, and just lock it away in the past. Yeah, because what's happening in the future requires their full attention, their full process, their full awareness, and they can't carry that with them because it's dragging them down. It's slowing them down. And once they come to a realization or an understanding that, okay, I do have a contract, and I don't have full control of that contract, but I do have control of being able to clear my karmic line or my ancestral line, and okay, clear some karmic debt out of my existence by doing that. They feel lighter. They feel,
Oh, for sure.
that they have an actual purpose now moving forward versus under this cloud of oppression of, oh, why did I put all this shit in my contract?
Or not even knowing that you did it.
Right,
If you're not awake,
Yeah.
you're not awake yet. You just
Right.
know you've been struggling with this abuse or whatever it is,
Right.
alcoholism in your family or
years.
something.
Over
So
and
much
over
of
and
it
over.
is just past stuff you're clearing
Yeah.
up.
Right.
And all to say, when we talk about this, the intentionality of bringing all this on, you have to understand if you are accepting, it's like those theorems, if you accept that, then you need to accept that you are not a victim.
Yes.
You cannot play in the victim mode.
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
is a luxury, to sit there and just, I don't want to say it's a weakness. It's a choice. It's a state of being that you're choosing, but it's so much more empowering to realize, okay, I don't know how high I must have been when I chose this one, but this is the life I chose. And, but the thing is, I keep saying to people when they're like, why would I choose this? I'm like, think about any book you've ever read about immortal beings. Every single lesson you learn is that, when you understand that life continues, that your consciousness continues. When you talk about immortal beings, they have the physicality, but we're talking about, your consciousness continues. Then you realize everything's temporary and you're willing to dive in and explore a lot more than you would.
Right.
I mean,
really was
in the greater perspective of existence, this life or a life as a human is only just a blip on that existence continuum. And if you go in with the approach that, we all come in completely, not completely wiped, but we come in with the least amount of awareness possible. We try to gain that as we go through this existence. But when you're going through that, we've used the term muggle world, right? We go through that muggle world and we're struggling with all of this BS that's going on. It's hard for us to see that awareness. It's hard for us to understand that we wrote that into our contract. And and I think this plays into that whole aspect of, the dark night of the soul and different aspects of the full turmoil, the full darkness, the full just place that one may have to get to begin to see the light on the other side. And not everyone is going to go through that depth, but, for myself, once I came to the realization that, hey, I made this journey, the one thing that was alleviated from I'll say my fear construct, and that's really where it was, is death. I really feared death for the longest time.
Oh, interesting.
And I even into the starting of this work, I still feared death. I was like, but I have so much more to do. And, what if Allison dies and all this stuff? But the further I came into my awareness, the further I understood what's taking place, the more I understand and feel comfortable with the fact that, I contracted this life. I contracted this life with Allison, with you, for other people that are, around me. Well, we get to do this again if I want to. We can all, the three of us, we can choose to do this shit all over again, or we can choose something else. And that really takes a lot of that burden off my shoulders of death, because then it's almost like the animals. The animals look, there's 2 points in an animal's life that they look forward to. It's the point that they're going to incarnate, and it's the point that they're going to transition. And they absolutely, those are the two most joyous moments in their life, because one, they're getting to come into a body. Yay, I get to come into a new body. I get to do new things, whatever animal that's going to be. Oh, you know what? I'm going to transition, but you know what? I get to do that all over again. Now I get to pick a different animal. I get to do something different. So it's this aspect of understanding that, death is just a small part of this existence and this life that we live. Yeah, we've contracted to do things, and it may be that this entire life was nothing more than just to experience those struggles.
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to this, and we've talked about this before, this idea that we're like, hell no, put a sticker on me. I'm not doing this again. Do not return, right? And
oh my God.
But in the origin story, one of the 12 talked about that joke. And they said, you joke about not wanting to come back, but when you get to the other side and you're back in harmony with these other souls, and the soul
Yeah.
comes and says, hey, I really need your help, you would choose to incarnate to help somebody else. Even if you
Yes.
don't want to incarnate again and you've learned everything you need to learn,
Mhm.
you would in a heartbeat jump back down here to help somebody else, because that's the nature of our God spark. We want to help. We want to, we love, we want to
Yeah.
be love. And so what was interesting with that was the Leadins, when they were talking to this client of ours, they said, you have to consider that you're in the contract of another person also. And that agreement in their contract is not in your contract. So sometimes there might be a situation and you're like, why in the hell did that happen? That seems so random. Like, what? This has nothing to do with me. It's not a lesson I was learning, whatever it is. Consider the fact that I might have been in Samantha's contract for whatever reason. And she pulled me into that contract to help her to do something, whatever it was. And because of free will, because I can't control Samantha's free will or mine, I make my own choices, but because I can't control all of those aspects of free will, then it could go haywire. And, that was another consideration that I had not heard before, actually, was that I guess I just didn't realize. I thought it might be an amalgamation, excuse me, of this tapestry, and that all of our contracts were kind of aligned and we would know about it, but perhaps not.
Yeah, no, the random aspect. And, okay, so people often ask about, okay, well, what about suicide? And so far, what I've come up with in that whole plan is that it's both, neither and everything. That some people come in because it's their intention to experience it. Whether it's they want to experience the angst or whatever the choice. There's some that come in and they go through it so that it's the greater lesson of those around them.
Yes.
And then there are those that it's kind of like opt out. It's just, and I think I'm coming more to the understanding. And again, there's no hard, fast rules and what's real truth or reality, but I'm coming to understand a little bit more that that there are accidents, because I've had a couple of afterlife sessions where the person said they had an oh shit moment. And it is an oh shit moment. Like generally it's like, oh shit, I didn't mean to do this. It's like, because you're playing around with that lifeline tether. And and now I've gotten to see what that is. And it's really fascinating. People who sit there and go, I don't want to die from this. I don't want to die from this, but I'm probably going to die and I don't want to die. Like they're asking for it. Like they're so focused on that, just releasing from that slip knot, and I actually had spirit come in one time to tell one of my clients, you're playing around with this and you need to stop because it is your will. I say that at the same time. I remember my great aunt, who she didn't want to be the last to go in her family. And she couldn't let herself go. Like she wanted to so badly. And to me, that was split energy. Like she wanted to go, but she was afraid to die. So there's all these other things that it's not a hard, fast rule. There are no hard, fast rules that I know of. There's a kind of general, we all agree to this.
There's some guidelines.
Physicality. And if you're going to play in this physical world, understand that we've set up so that your DNA, you're going to get older, and that you're not going to generally heal miraculously, that there's a couple of other things at play, and that everyone's going to generally see a blue sky and green grass, that there's certain things we've agreed to, but within that, there's alchemy, there's all kinds of other stuff that we can play with, and it gets pretty fascinating.
Right. And I wanted to, before I forget, mention there's a book by Robert Schwartz. He writes The Soul's Plan, I believe it is. And he had another follow-up book, I believe, but that book really helped me wrap my brain around some of the more traumatic things that we would pick for our contract and that we actually do and why. And it really is comforting when we're talking about a murder or suicide or miscarriages or adoption or abortion, all of those things that you think there's no way. Why would somebody pick that or choose that or write? But that's a really helpful and comforting book for anybody who is curious about those more significant points of a contract. I would recommend reading those books.
I mean, one thought that's been popping in my head is I don't know, I don't know if it's in the Conversations with God book or what, but it's that whole, why do bad things happen to good people aspect? It's
That was a Christian.
Oh, was
what
it?
was his name?
oh,
I think they do talk about it.
Yeah.
And
But he
'cause that
actually
was the
has a
big
book
outrage,
called
yeah.
Why Do Bad Things
Oh, okay.
Happen? And it's is he maybe he's a rabbi, maybe he's Jewish.
Mm.
But anyway, yeah.
He's religious.
Why do
Yeah.
bad things happen to good people?
But I mean, it would fall into this realm of, of contracts. It would fall into this understanding that, not all of this life is going to be, peaches and cream. There's going to be bad things that are
For
going to
sure
happen.
You
not.
can't learn when everything's vanilla.
Yeah.
How
Right.
do you know what anything else is?
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and it's, and the way I describe the other side, what I have felt of it so far, what I understand of it is that you still have experiences, you have degrees of, emotion or whatever, but it's not like here where it's so severe, so sharp, where your
Mhm.
learning is so advanced, like just, and so we come here for the roller coaster ride,
Yeah.
for the highs and lows, and to experience all of that, and just, so.
And I will preface that by saying that in this same channeling, different question, but the Lyran said the experience of being a human is so profound that all of these other beings that you're on councils with, all of these other ET beings who have never been in a human body, cannot contribute much of anything to this council. In way of experiences or observations. They can experience what it's like to be, in upper dimensional levels where everything is hunky-dory.
Okay.
But only humans can
I
actually
can see the
go,
wheels
hey,
turning."
here's the what for, here's what's happening. This is why this human is
Yeah.
doing this, or this is what's going on. Let me tell you from my direct experiential knowledge of what's happening.
And so now this makes a lot
And
more
that's more valuable.
I've been doing readings with people where, I check and see what their guides have to say first thing, and then we jump into Q&A, except it's not always their guide. I've had these angels, and the thing is, they're not archangels. They are what I call, I guess they're hybrids.
Mm.
They are, and I've said lesser angels, and for
Guardian angels?
No, they're hybrid. They're part human. They're part, and the reason why is, and it was fascinating because then when I have this conversation with Judy Buchanan, is like, she's like, oh yeah. And I'm going, what do you mean? Oh yeah, this is something that I've just really, and I'm getting goosebumps again here. But they are where archangels kind of handle overall major things. And these are more recent beings that have been created because they're able to come in, intercede, advise, because they understand the human experience, which so many other beings just they don't get. They can give you, like, I know if I do a channeling for someone, a multidimensional channeling, it's from a view up here.
Yep.
And you're kind of going, don't tell me, about how the laws of abundance work. It's like, I want money.
Right.
These hybrid angels are able to come in, which makes me now go, see, my brain's just, now I need to connect with one of those when I'm talking to a human. I haven't thought about that, but they're there to help the more practical reality because we've moved into this greater awareness and we're not as simple a being as we used to be. So it is more complex. It is more so anyway, so there's that. Wow. Sorry, just put together a bunch of things.
You see, we're learning too as we go.
Yeah.
We're learning about and processing things and coming up with new awarenesses.
I think you're right about, we rely on, we say our guides and, archangels and different angels and different beings. But I think there is some, something with that as far as the upper level beings, we'll say,
yes,
the archangels, they only really have a perspective of that
They've
upper dimensional
never
space.
been in human body, so they don't have a
two,
perspective.
Except for two.
Well, and this is what I said from the beginning of when we were channeling was that, it's fun and profound to talk to the higher level beings, no matter what they are. But it's very philosophical and it's very profound.
You're often not going to get the answer, the practical answers.
Right.
That's right.
It's going to expand your mind for sure.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm always trying to find a tricky way to ask the collective questions because I want to get them into that box. And they always answer it in such a bigger way. And so, we just made the point, and I I'm taking the point home.
And this is also why, though, that I sometimes when we're channeling, I'll ask who was answering that question, because early on they said it's not so important who's answering the question or labeling, because then,
Right.
humans were like, oh, well, I'm working with Archangel Michael and you're only working with so-and-so or whatever.
Right.
We love to do that. Right. And so they don't like giving names sometimes or having us get into that mentality.
Oh,
But
that's
for me, it's super important
bit
to
of a
know whether I'm talking
validation,
to a fifth dimensional ET being who does have a little bit more understanding of what it's like to be embodied,
Mhm.
That makes
or
sense.
a 10th dimensional angel being that's never been embodied, because
Right.
it gives you a perspective on their answer,
Mhm.
because they're going to answer in a different
Yes.
way
Yeah.
based on their
Wow.
perspective, right?
So we could probably come to a conclusion that most of our spirit guides, most of our spirit team has embodied for the most part, maybe not always, but the majority of them in some way, shape, or form have embodied
In a
and
physical body.
yeah, so that they can give us
Yeah.
more practical.
And I would say that,
guidance.
if you're, how do I say this? Like for myself, I don't like call upon my guides all the time. I really don't. When I go into my channeling, I know that I have a group that I call in to get me in there. But as far as everyday operation, I don't call upon a different bunch. But that being said, yes, I think it's a split mix that are always around you. Those that are closest to this realm are going to
Oh, for
help
sure.
steer and guide you through the difficulties of the physicality.
They got your back.
They got your
Mhm,
back.
mhm.
When you're really getting into those moments where you're struggling a bit more and trying to contemplate deeper aspects of your awareness,
existence,
your
yeah.
existence, that's when the upper levels drop in.
Well, they all
Well,
serve a different purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I was moving the vortex thing.
Yeah.
But a relationship had established before with Archangel Michael, and then because it was coming to a practical purpose
Yeah.
that no other individual was really going to be able to give me that guidance.
Right.
So and because he was actually holding the space, so that was a whole kind of other experience, I guess.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing that I wanted to mention about contracts that we learned,
Remember, this is about contracts and
Right.
free will.
Right.
We're just, but
We're
all of this
expanding
stuff
down rabbit
plays
holes.
into
Yeah.
it.
sure, but we understood there are these things called foundational documents. Foundational documents. Now, I had never heard of that. I don't know
Where
if you've
did
heard
you
of
hear
that.
about that?
A couple of years ago, I don't know if it was in a private session or personal channeling. So I don't know if this was a higher self.
I think it was a client session.
but I've heard it several times since then, so I know that this is an accurate thing. But
Mhm.
you create an overarching kind of contractual agreement with another being, perhaps,
Mhm.
and maybe it could be what do they call it? When you take one soul and you split it and then you find each
Twin
other again.
flame?
Thank you.
Twin
Twin
Yeah.
flame. I try to forget about that because it's so overhyped. Anyway, might be with a twin flame, or it might be with another soul that you,
Right.
or it might just
Mhm.
be, okay, in every single life, I want to have a warrior aspect. Or in every single life, I want to work with Isis or Mother Mary or whatever it is. But you have this foundational document and
Okay.
it comes in every single life, and you can't just break that off.
Mhm. Mhm.
I guess
Yeah.
when you transition, you could go back and reevaluate, but it
So
isn't
that's-
something that you can change.
Yeah, that's not the same thing as like a bleed over. Like I've experienced a couple of clients where they had certain aspects. One client was, they had this thing where they just wanted to save the world. Like they just had this
Mhm.
really strong
Mhm.
whatever. And when we looked at her past life, she had wanted to be a nun and had been denied that, and so had tried to carry out good works through whatever. And so that aspect was still carrying on into this lifetime.
Yep.
I don't know that that's necessarily a foundational
Right.
document.
Not
So
quite
I-
the same.
Yeah, I describe it like a bleed over. Like it's this inner yearning that is still hanging
Because you
with
didn't complete it last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Sure.
carrying on a legacy quote unquote legacy from a past life. You leave that thread open
There we go.
in order so
Okay,
that you can,
legacy.
it might take several lives
That's
to
true.
accomplish
That is true
one
too.
particular aspect of a mission.
There are multi-life goals
Okay.
that you might have that'll take several incarnations. Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. too.
And so with those people, it seems like the majority, well, so far, I haven't had that many experiences, but they all seem to be people who want to be in service.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, you know, well, I want to be a serial killer. Or something
Right.
Want to be a
like that. You
jerk
know,
for
it's like-
several lives.
Multiple lifetime serial killer. Yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be this higher goal of
Mhm.
serving humanity or something that
And it could very well be,
carries.
if you dig far enough in those lives, that, you know, in the most recent, they're on a cycle of helping humanity, where in lives prior to that, much further back, they may have been there, you know, on the opposite end of it and taking lives, right? You know, they were there, they were the warrior, they were the one out in the battlefield, they were the one that was, you know, being disruptive.
So it's
So now they're trying to
Mhm.
balance that back out by living multiple lives of servanthood of humanity. So
Okay, so I always take this back to, I used to never do this before, but because I've really been practicing the concept of, or expanding upon the concept that it's all happening at the same time.
oh yeah.
So if you think about your higher self looking at these arcs and going, I'm going to fine tune this one to understand what this one is like. And I'm going to now do a separate timeline of this to then feel what, I mean, like we can't even begin to, but I talk about this stuff because I'm trying to stretch my brain on
Yeah.
it. And we can't even fathom what that control board of
Right.
that single spiritual being creating all of these things, you
How
know,
it's all weaving together and going out in different directions.
And the other thing is your oversoul, which is the greater peace. Like your oversoul has kind of an understanding, I don't want to say control, but of all of your aspects. So if right now you have a parallel life as a Zeta and you're this, and you also have a parallel human life, you have all of these aspects of you out there, that's all falls under your oversoul. And your oversoul might have a general goal. Like I found out in a session that my oversoul wanted to explore control, like victim and controller.
Mhm.
So when the big C happened in 2020, I had a really, really challenging time because of the manipulation that was happening with people, the force, the
Yep.
coercion, the untruths, the lies, the manipulation, and all of that.
Yeah.
People trying to control. And I had to get a grip on it. So I called some friends of mine to help me do a surrogate session. And they said that the oversoul said that I had been working this out for many lives. And in fact, the life previous to this one, I was a Nazi working with Hitler's inner circle.
Mhm.
Right. And
Right.
that on my deathbed, I realized the error of my ways. And as I was transitioning, I was like, no, I don't want to go. I want to make it right. I want to make it right. Because I had figured it out, but it was too late. And I went up. And so now in this life, I'm the one that doesn't want to be manipulated and fights against the manipulation and the control. And so my whole oversoul has been struggling with this. And that's why it was so hard for me in this life. So when you have an understanding of those types of things, it also makes it easier for you to be okay with the things that you've written in your contract because you get it from a bigger picture.
Which, let me expand upon that one step further, is to understand compassion for everyone.
Mhm.
Like, you know, we sit there and go, oh, this person in human history was horrible. Well, okay, the role that they played, yes, but the soul themselves, you know, it's kind of like,
There's no difference.
yeah, it's, you know, they're
It's a struggle.
it could have been an aspect of you, who knows?
Right.
I find that really fascinating. And, you know, I've told you about this one medium that I follow a lot who did this past life channeling of Adolf Hitler.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I found this really fascinating because when they came, you know, when they brought his energy in, and there was a surrogate helping them on the other side, helping them to connect.
Mhm.
And they said that, you know, basically that he was just sitting there, just the energy was just sitting there. And so they tried to talk with the energy, and the energy is just there. And then they had to instead shift to the higher aspect, the higher
Mhm.
self, to which shifting to the higher self, you get a broader understanding of
Mhm.
what was the goal. But that part of that aspect of that soul was so the role that they played, what all they did, they're saying was so intense that it's just like time out.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just there's a lot of healing. And that makes sense to me because there's a lot of people who put themselves into a purgatory when they cross over. And it's like they need to atone, but no one makes them. They just self-atone, you know, to try to work through the drama or trauma that they went through or created or, you know, suffered, whatever it is. I just thought the aspect of Hitler was really fascinating because, you know, it's kind of like they don't know. You know, of course, everyone can come back to the light, you know, every aspect,
because we are
an
that
aspect of the higher self, but it's just going to take time. And then what's time?
Well, I've heard a lot about Hitler situations and that you cannot, and I've heard this from Cryon and also Neil Donald Walsh and all of them. You cannot get away with it. It's not like you're getting away with anything. So in this life, if you find there's a bunch of villains and you're thinking they're never going to get their due, it isn't the case. Even if they don't get their due in this life, they are making amends, so to speak, when they get to the spirit realm. They are going through a process of what you call purgatory or healing. It's about balancing because you spent a lot of time in this lower vibrational frequency, and that's still kind of carried with you right away. And you have to take time to heal that and bring that back into balance, into the harmony of the God source. And one other interesting thing I was going to mention about fulfilling your contract, we had a woman several years ago when we first started channeling, and she was about 72-ish. And she was tired. She was one of those, and we might have even mentioned it on this podcast before, but she was one of those that had been doing this kind of work as medium. And I think she was clairvoyant and all of that.
40, 50 years she was doing this work.
And was the backlash. She suffered through all of that backlash. People think she was crazy, all of that kind of stuff. And she was tired. Well, she developed breast cancer, and she wanted to have a private session. She came in and we let her ask a few questions when we were kind of just practicing around. And she started arguing with her higher self and guides. She said, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this. I'm too tired. Just
I'm done with the human experience.
Yeah. And they said, well, so she didn't want to treat it. And they said, you have more to do. And she's like, good God, what else can I have to do? You have a little bit more on your contract. And she goes, well, then you better heal my body and give me some stamina because I cannot keep going. And they said, and they say this very matter of fact in a loving way. It's not like they're saying, sorry, Charlie, but they basically said that if you die or allow yourself to die before your contract was supposed to, then you're going to get to the other side and regret it. You're going to come back. You will come back to finish what you didn't finish. And it wasn't like I'm punishing you and sending you back.
It's yourself doing
You're going to want to come back to do this. Right. So I don't know. She kind of drifted away. I don't know what happened to her. But I remember that so vividly because, like me, she had a point and wanted to argue that point. And
very fast.
But but I do remember as she was arguing with them, I kind of slid away in case they came down with a lightning bolt. And they because she was argumentative with her guides. I'm like,
yeah, but
because back then,
a couple of
now I have. But back then, I was very reverential, which I still think to some degree we can be. I was very reverential, very respectful, very humble in front of these beings.
I think we can be
and
snarky.
For sure.
And that was early on in the process. I was still being induced.
I'm like, what's wrong with you? Stop arguing.
I was still laying on the table doing that.
But you weren't aware.
I had no idea until we get done and everybody's gone. And Allison's like, you're never going to believe what happened. I'm like, what happened? So yeah. So it's one of those aspects of, I'm thankful that I do disappear and I don't remember anything, because that would be a very easy place for my ego to slide in and have something to say. But I'm so disconnected from it that I don't have a clue.
No, see, I sit there and hear what's coming through, and I recognize what they're saying before they say it, and I'm just going, please don't say that, please don't say that. Oh my God, they just said that, and like that's going through my mind.
Yeah.
Sure. And yet I'm released from it. And it's kind of like, thank God, because I don't have to own it, but it's come out of my mouth, and it's just.
Even Paul Selig, when he's channeling and his guides will deliver, say, and Paul's having difficulty with this one. They'll say that out loud. It's kind of funny.
My gosh.
Anything else we need to? I think that's all the notes I had about
one well. I think
Yeah.
we covered that
And
one well.
hopefully you all listening, like you really embody this, because it's meant, I mean, the information should be liberating. It
Mhm.
places the responsibility square on you for the life that you live. But it also gives you the opportunity to look at challenges and just say, wow, and it's not the how or whatever. It's just to go, interesting that I should have put this one in my path.
Yeah.
This will be kind of like when I get to the other side of it, and I have seen someone, a Facebook acquaintance who had some form of cancer, and she's very spiritual, and she shared the journey, and she had that attitude. There were times where, she was going, why the hell is this happening to me? I just don't understand it. And then she'd say, okay, this is curious, and now
Yeah.
this is occurring. And I didn't realize I'd get this many people following and want to see this journey. And then, so you saw the human self struggle, and you saw the spiritual. It's the duality. Like
Yeah.
the more I think that we're authentic about the duality of what we're experiencing, because like I always see both sides of things.
Yeah.
And, and it's really nice to every once in a while. I mean, you're here to be human. So gosh, it's so nice when you can indulge and just be human and be pissed about everything.
Right.
But then, you collect yourself and you move back into, okay, balance.
Well, it is liberating for us to hear that from others. That's why we're very honest and open and authentic with you guys, that we struggle too. And we're not perfect. We have body aches and moments of fighting or whatever we do, and arguing with the collective.
We're human.
For sure. So that's liberating. But thank you for sharing this time with us. This was a really fun conversation. Hopefully it was enlightening for you all out there. If you have any comments, feel free to share with us. We love the comments. And thank you for watching. Hit the notification bell, subscribe, like, and share away.
Please do.
Definitely.
And
Thank you.
until next time.
See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.